Dziękuję? Dziękuję. Dzień dobry. And that is all my Polish. It's a pleasure to be here with you all who care so much about your cities and the future of cities. It was also a pleasure to hear Professor Zimbardo because his research and the research of scientists like him has driven my own research and my own explorations around the world, trying to understand the intersection between human happiness and urban design for the past 10 years. I'm going to begin by telling you a story. You may think it has nothing to do with your work. I promise you it does. So, in 2011, I was invited by the Guggenheim Museum to help create an urban laboratory here in the Lower East Side of New York City. Now, we had lots of money. We were sponsored by a car company. And so the curators kept calling it a laboratory. And I say, well, you keep calling this a laboratory. Let's use some of that money and conduct some experiments. One of the first experiments I conducted was this. I said, can we turn this basically empty space for one night into a machine that is going to build feelings of trust and affection amongst New Yorkers? Now, I'm from a very small town on an island on the coast of Canada. And New York is a very big, scary city for me. This was the heart of the urban jungle, the Lower East Side. It was noisy, it was chaotic, there was conflict between rich and poor. How was I going to do this? I was suddenly very scared, and I realized I couldn't do it alone. So I called a team of what I call superhero experimentalists from various disciplines to help me. Number one, I called the psychologists, people like Professor Zimbardo. The psychologist I called said, it's very simple, you need to do one thing. Give people hot chocolate to drink. And I said, that sounds very strange to me. And they said, no, hot chocolate is wonderful. The science says when people hold something warm, it causes them to have warmer feelings about the people around them, as though the temperature has a metaphorical effect on the sociology of space. But they said, make sure you give 2 cups of hot chocolate to everyone. So when they get a cup, they have to give the second cup to the person at the back of the line. I said, well, okay, sure, well, let's try that. Why not? Then there was an artist running around New York City trying to bring people together with simple interventions. This intervention was called Stranger Unstranger. It was very simple. I put my hand here, you put your hand there, and neither of us can leave until we're no longer strangers. This seemed very inexpensive. I said, bring it on. He brought several of these small interventions. We changed the lighting of the space. We showed pictures of people being friendly in public. But there were other things. For example, I mentioned I'm from a small town, and I was in the big city. So I went to every party I could. And in New York, you meet the strangest people at parties. For example, a woman. She said, I am a professor of fashionable technology. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about, but whatever it is, I think I had 3 beers at this point. Whatever it is, you have to come to my experiment. You have to do something. And she said, great, I have an idea. My students will create this for you. These are heat-sensitive garments. So when 2 people touch, the garment changes. As you can see, my assistant here is literally changing my heart. We did many other things. I'm going to tell you about one more invitation I made. I have a friend, he calls himself a neuroeconomist. He studies this molecule. This is oxytocin. Now I'm going to see if the translation is working. Are there any women in the audience who have had children? Please put up your hands. So, it's taking a moment. Women who have had children, higher please, higher. Okay, you know oxytocin. Oxytocin is the hormone that you receive through your system after you give birth. And it causes you to feel warm and loving towards a child who is screaming. I wish I had more oxytocin because I live with some children and headaches sometimes. But in fact, we all experience oxytocin every time we have an encounter in public with a stranger that builds trust. So Professor Zach said to me, I'll come to your experiment. And I said, well, okay, what is your intervention? What is your test? And he said, it's very simple. I want everybody in the space to hug complete strangers for 1 hour. Stranger, 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 stranger. All of them would be hugging. Now, I said, Paul, you're in California. You do that there. This is New York. It's not going to happen. And he said, no, I'm not coming unless we do the hug. And I said, oh, God, okay, fine, we'll try it. So the night came, we opened the doors, we invited New Yorkers. Now, before I tell you what happened, I'm going to back off and tell you how I got to this point, why we were doing this crazy experiment. So, as you've been told, I was working on my book. In English, it's called Happy City. And through the course of my research, I found this. Yes, it's true. The places we live, cities, urban systems, they change the way we feel, they change the way we move, and they change the way we treat each other in ways most of us don't even see. So, if this is true, then it is our responsibility to do everything we can to build more happiness into cities. This isn't a crazy idea, not at all. Some of our greatest thinkers have been pushing for a philosophy and for a policy of happiness in cities for thousands of years. Aristotle was out in the Agora in ancient Athens calling for happiness work in policy and in individual action. But the problem is, if you're going to try to build happiness into place, how do you do it? Well, what do we mean by happiness, first of all? This has been a real problem. This has been a particular problem in Western economies, because back in the Enlightenment, when they tried to take a scientific approach to human happiness, they failed. They tried to measure, whoops, that's a hint. They tried to measure pleasure and pain, and they failed, which is when economists stepped in and said, don't worry, we've got the answer. We will find a proxy for happiness. Let's watch how people spend their money, and that will tell us what makes them happy. So the result has been a system, and a system you have seemed to have embraced in the past 30 years, that says, if we just measure our success through gross domestic product, if we watch how much people spend, then we will know what makes people happy, and that will make people happier. So we have this crazy world where GDP equals happiness, where divorce, car accidents, cancer, all of these things supposedly increase happiness by increasing GDP. It's a bit broken, no? Well, more recently, real scientists have actually been studying human happiness and finding evidence for happiness and understanding of happiness in the human brain and in the human body. For example, neuroscientists have found that people who report being happy, they have more activity in the pleasure centers of their brains, and they have lower levels of stress hormones like cortisol through their blood systems. We're learning from various fields, from neuroscience, from psychology, from sociology, from public health. Now, what are we learning about happiness? What are the ingredients if we're going to choose happiness in policy and in cities? I'm going to take you through a very quick list, learning from all these disciplines. What does it take? What is the recipe? Well, obviously, you must meet your core needs. Food, shelter, security, or you can forget about the rest. But once we've done that, what matters next? We need to consider pleasure and pain. It is much more fun to drink a beautiful Polish beer than it is to swallow razor blades, for example. I think we can all agree. Health is important, but how healthy you feel is more important than what your doctor says about your health. You can feel healthy until the moment you die, and that is a good life. The economists were right. Income matters. It's much better to be rich than to be poor. But if you're thinking about happiness in a city, in society, equity matters. Societies that are more fair are more happy. Mastery. This sense, and this is a lesson from psychology, this sense that you can get through your day and through your city without being crushed down. Very important. As is a sense of freedom. I can choose how to live and how to move. But even more important, and I think Professor Zimbardo touched on this, when we have a sense of meaning in our lives, my life matters, and a sense of belonging to a place, to a community, we're happier. But if you see all of these, they are all connected by one element that is more important than every other, and that is social ties. Nothing matters more to human happiness. So people who are socially connected, and here I offer you the best example of all. This is my Mexican family. If you can see, they're very happy. It's not just because they're eating a lot and drinking a lot. It's because they are connected. And they understand that people who are socially connected, they're more productive, they're less likely to get sick, they're less likely to check into a psychology ward in the hospital, they're more likely to survive cancer, they're more productive at work, and they live on average 15 years longer than people who are socially disconnected. Nothing matters more. This plays out across cities. Let me show you data from Canada. In Canada, the economists have found that people in cities where they express high trust in their neighbors, they are also expressing the most happiness with their lives. So in other words, your relationship with everybody else matters. Now, if you don't know Canada, these are our big, rich cities down at the bottom. Low trust, low happy. By the way, every single Canadian city expresses much higher trust than every single Polish city. So, but comparatively, in Canada, low trust, low satisfaction. Our happiest city is a small town, very poor, very humble. Now, this isn't to say that money doesn't matter. I told you, money really does matter. It's just that the social effect, social trust matters much more. And our relationship with everybody else in the city matters. Psychologist Elizabeth Dunn, she followed people around cities. She got them to click whenever they have an encounter with another person. And what she found was people who have many superficial encounters with complete strangers, they were just as happy at the end of the day as people who had lots of time with family and friends. Some of us may understand that. So the point is, your experience with everybody else in the city matters for your happiness in the very day. We know that social trust, relationships are essential for the economy. Poland, you're down here. Lower trust, which is correlating with low GDP growth. Now, we're not. This isn't to suggest causation, but there is a strong correlation between trust and economic growth. And I think all of us can imagine it's impossible to finish a business deal if you don't trust the other person. So, what I'm going to speak about in the rest of my time today is this. The happy city is a social city above all. It matters more than anything, and we can build it, and we must build it. And in fact, our cities are designing our social lives. Let me give you some evidence. People who have a longer commute to work, and this is specifically people who are driving alone in cars, are reporting lower life satisfaction. This isn't just saying, do you like your commute? The question is, how happy are you with your entire life? The longer the drive, the less the happiness. Now, this is very bad news. What's happening here? Well, we know one thing that's happening is that when we are driving, surveys are showing people are experiencing much more rudeness and incivility. And I'm sorry, I understand in Poland this is considered to be a very, very rude gesture. Excuse me. In Canada, we do it all the time when we're angry. But you can see, this may be me driving last week, in fact. We experience more rudeness and incivility, but that's only the beginning. Long drives do this to us. Audience participation. We need to have a vote. You can either hear the long, boring scientific explanation for this, or I can give you the very quick meaning. So if you would like to hear the long, boring scientific explanation, please say, tak. Really? If you would like to hear the short version, say tak. You're very quiet, all of you. I think the second version wins. Okay. It's very simple. Geographers have found that there's the strongest correlation with with the inability to meet people in the city, to encounter family and strangers, is something they call dispersal. The degree to which the functions of the cities are spread out. You live here, you work there, you play here, you shop there. The further they are apart, the less social the city. It's as simple as that. Now, there's another element at play here. Let me first give you the results of that dispersal. Here's what we know from data in the United States. And remember, nobody does sprawl, dispersal, better than the United States. Nobody has gone further. So the people who live in car-dependent communities, far away from everything, far away from the edge of the center of the city, they are the least likely to know and trust their neighbor. They're least likely to have friends for dinner. They're least likely to volunteer or to play team sports or even to vote. We know that people who have more than a 40-minute commute to work, couples, they're more than 45% more likely to be divorced after 10 years. So that distance, it's infecting our lives. Distance alone isn't the problem. Obviously, traffic congestion is a problem. Now, one thing they've learned in China is if you keep building more roads, this will not solve your traffic congestion problems. I promise you. You must learn this in Poland because I understand you're taking your EU money that was intended for rail lines and you're building more highways. This is what's coming. We call it induced demand. You build more roads, you induce more people to drive. There is only one solution. And the solution is to move people to walk or take transit again. Well, you have an emerging emergency here. This is very dangerous. You're moving away from public transit. And you're moving towards private cars. You're moving away from walking as well. This is very dangerous for the future of your city. If you love to drive, and I love to drive, the best thing for your city is to get everybody else on transit. Right? Well, there's only one way to do that. So we know that the solution to congestion is not building more roads. The solution is this. You can see you fit more people on a bus. This will take an entire city block of cars. So how do you get there? Well, you have to pay for it. This is why I want to remind you, the hero of my book, Happy City, is this man, Enrique Peñalosa. He was the mayor of Bogota, Colombia, during a time where the city was the worst place in the world to live. Crime, congestion, violence, low social trust, pollution. He promised to make his city happier through design. One of the main things he did was this. He created a public transit system. It was simple, just using rapid buses, no subway. That was very high status. He said the bus needs to be a sexy red color. It has to have a sexy name. He called it Transmilenio. And this bus had stations. This reminds me of your airport in Krakow. Beautiful, sleek, high status. This is a bus station. By doing that, he convinced people to leave other forms of transportation and take the bus. And guess what? Not only did he ensure that the buses cross the city faster than any other vehicle, because public transit should never wait behind a private car. But at the end of his term, because people switched their way of moving, everybody got to work faster. The rich person in their BMW got to work faster because everyone else switched. By the end of his term, the city was getting more optimistic. People reported finally feeling some hope for the future. Now, in Canada, people laugh at this picture. Can anybody tell me what is wrong with this picture? Anyone? Please, I will give you a hug. No, I promise not to give you a hug if you took. One hand, please. There's nothing wrong? You don't see anything strange about this. That's it, they're smiling. In Canada, this is considered very strange. Why? Because people think of public transit, the bus, the tram, as low status and no fun. You must have a much better transit system here than in my city. No. Okay, so This was a propaganda from a transit agency. Most of us think that transit is no fun. And in fact, people who take transit say their trips are less fun than people who drive or take other uses because transit is chronically underfunded. But an interesting piece of research has emerged. It is this. If my translation is correct, it says something like, public transit, the bus, makes you happier. And in fact, in Great Britain, they have found people who switch from driving to public transit say they are happier with their entire life after they switch. Why is that? The journey is harder, but it makes their life happier. And the researchers think this is the reason. A public transit trip is not just a transit trip. It's a walk, it's transit, and then a walk. And it's the walk that makes people happier. So walking and designing places for good walking is the sacred trust of cities. The other thing as well, we know that the average household size in Poland is now 2.8 people. So there's very few people at home. Your living space is now public space. Out here with my mother. So how are we going to create a city where people want to walk, want to meet together? I was very curious about this, and I thought, let's have some more experiments. Let's take some money from this car company at the Guggenheim Lab and see how public space makes people feel. We created a tour through the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I invited a neuroscientist. He hooked people up with skin conductance monitors. These measured people's level of arousal as they move through space. How excited are you? We also used phones to track people's happiness. They punched in, how happy am I right now? We learned many things. One of the things that was most interesting was this. People said they were much happier here, in this dirty, messy, jumbled up old tenement block of New York, than they were here, in front of this modern, sleek, award-winning building. What's the difference? Well, here we see there's just glass, no doors, no windows, no openings, nothing happening. Here, lots of activity. I call this a slow place. People slow down, there's shops, services, doors, windows, things happening. So think about that. We need to be very careful because as people and businesses and stores come back to central cities, they're doing this. They are killing block after block. So I introduced you to my friend, the volunteer. I was very interested to see this happiness effect on street edges. Could it also be a social effect? Could it change the way we treat other people? So in Seattle, we sent volunteers out to pretend to be very stupid, helpless, lost tourists. Kind of like me in Krakow. Just help me. We surveyed environments, we had blank environments, and we had active environments with lots going on, like New York, small shops and services. What we found is our volunteer got much, much more help in front of the active, slow environment with many small businesses, shops, and services than in the blank environment. So these places can actually make us not just happier, but kinder, which means the last 30 years have been a disaster in many countries around the world. Here's London. Here you have some traditional architecture on the left that draws people, that slows them down. Here you have what we call starchitecture on the right, high status, taking lots of space. They have killed the sidewalk, and it may look sleek and it may win awards, but it is killing the life of the street. It's not enough to use pictures of people on the edges of buildings. Pictures of people are not people. People are people. Krakow, what are you doing? These environments, this is a dead space. It is dangerous. It is socially unhealthy. You're killing the edge of the street life. It doesn't have to be this way. You just need to mix it up. In Vancouver, we have a very powerful, active city planning department. Now, I understand the past 30 years, you've been moving away from government control of things. You just need to know, and I want to remind you that in many capitalist economies, our success in our cities depends on an interventionist planning department. In this case, a big business, Home Depot, they sell hardware. They wanted to build one gigantic store on this block. And what did this planner say in Vancouver? Yes, come, please, we want your business. But you can't be on the ground. You go up. And you can put houses on top of that. And on the ground, you must have small business. Boom, 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 on the street edge to make a place that is healthier, more walkable, more social, more vibrant. And guess what? Later, this business owner said, thank you, Vancouver, because we make more money on the small lease spaces. Okay. Professor Zimbardo talked about nature. Can I get a time check? Because I may skip nature. How much time do I have left? Yes? Go faster? No, go slower. Okay. We'll talk about nature very slow. So, as Professor Zimbardo said, nature is important. When we experience it, we feel calm, we feel good. And yes, more recent research shows it has a social effect. Some of the research is done by people who are not scientists. The experiments we did in New York City, these were intended to give people a visceral understanding of the science. So what I'm showing you here probably looks like a child's experiment in high school. Sure, it is. But we're reflecting what is being learned in peer-reviewed research. So we immersed people, on one hand, on the left, in a brutal urban environment, and they listened to sounds of cars and honking. On the right, we immersed people in a nature environment, and they listened to bird songs. Just for 8 minutes. We did this at a big party. So when people were finished, their 8 minutes, we said, here's $10. Thank you for participating. Oh, by the way, we're raising money for a very good cause. Can we have some of the money back to give to this good cause? What we found is people who were immersed in nature, they didn't just feel better. They were more generous. They gave more money back. Again, it looks like a high school science experiment, but it reflects peer-reviewed research. What does this tell us for cities? We need more nature. We need to infuse spaces with nature, but we do not need to do this. Do not take evidence and create an overly simplified response. If you create huge parks like this, as they do in the United States, which is a massive mistake, in the United States, big parks like this are causing children to gain weight. They get fatter in the summer months because they invest in such a big park, they don't have small parks close to home. So children cannot walk to the park. So don't go big, go small. We need to infuse nature experience into the hearts of cities. We don't just need to see it. We don't just need to smell it. We need to touch it. And best of all, we need to work together in nature. I was very excited to see in East Berlin, where they're taking some of the old communist housing blocks with the dead lawn in between. And by dead, I mean socially dead. Nothing happens there. And they're turning these into gardens where seniors, old people, and children are working together with the dirt and bringing them together and creating community. Even small interventions help. Okay. I think in Poland it's very important to be speaking about the effect that movement has on social life. This is East Houston Street in New York City, a wide, busy street, not as bad as some of your streets on the edges. How does this street make people feel? How does crossing it make people feel? Well, again, we use the skin conductance monitors to measure the level of arousal, which in this case is really measuring your level of fear. And as you can see here, people are getting scared even before they come to the edge of the street. They're getting ready to cross the street, and they're getting aroused. And then, crossing, very scary. This has a social effect. It means the two sides of the street are no longer linked. It means I won't come to meet you on the other side. It means you have to stop doing this. In Poland, we stopped yesterday at this intersection. You have so many cars. You want to give more space to the cars, even though only 1/3 of people are traveling by car. So what do? You create 2 turning lanes at this intersection. What it means is it's very far to get across. What it means is this man here, excuse me, I should be pointing up here. This man here, he has trouble walking. You see, he's looking at the light. It's already red. It's already too late. He's already in danger. This isn't just a social problem. In some ways, this is a human rights issue. Who has the right to own and cross the city? Who? Just car drivers or everyone? Speaking of rights, I don't understand why the 30%, 35%, so 1/3 of people who are driving in your city, they now have the right to take over half of your sidewalks. Someone please explain this to me. What we do know from research is if you give more space for people, for humans, to walk in the central city, and you limit the space for cars, you create more life, you boost the economy. We're seeing in cities around the world, when you do that, you make more money, and the city gets more taxes. So please move on. And this is happening around the world. This is the famous superhero, Peatonito. He's from Mexico, and what he does is he pushes parked cars off sidewalks. He's coming to Europe, watch out. We know in great cities around the world, this public space is being reclaimed. In the center of Krakow, you see it. Oh, you're beautiful. Pedestrian walkways on these streets. I had so much joy. You know, I'm very far from home, and I miss my friends, and I miss my family, and I feel very lonely. But when I walk on your pedestrian streets, I don't feel alone anymore. So thank you for that. But this is happening everywhere, okay? This is happening in cities where they're realizing that cycling is not just good, but that 60% of people in cities want to cycle, but they won't do it because they're too scared. We're realizing cycling can be a high-status activity in advanced societies. In Denmark, the royal family, the cabinet of parliament, they're all biking to work. Because it's easy, because it's fun, not because they want to save the world, not because they're hippies, but you can only have it if you build the safe, separated infrastructure. We're reclaiming space around the world, Mexico City now, for people to have fun, to experience joy. In the heart of the United States, with the worst traffic in the world, they're taking back that space to create social space for people to come together. And when governments and planners don't do it, the people must step up and do it themselves. So it's happening in suburban realms, not just in city center. But this is what inspires me most, is people are not waiting for the government anymore. They're doing it themselves. Again, this is the United States, where they built roads too wide for too long. It's the path you're taking now, by the way. We drove around the outskirts of your city yesterday, and you're doing it everywhere. You're following the mistakes that were made in the United States and in Canada for 30 years. And guess what? Now we're taking space back. When people do it themselves, when they gather as a community to turn public space, because your streets are public space, back into community space, when they work together to meet each other and transform this space, a tremendous thing happens. It has an immediate psychological effect on the neighborhood. In fact, Jan Semenza, a researcher for the European Centers for Disease Control, says this is called street repair or intersection repair. He's recommending it as a climate change adaptation strategy. Why? It's not about getting rid of the cars. It's about building strong local relationships. So when environmental shocks happen, the neighborhood is strong. People can work together. Okay, this kind of thing, meeting in public, it changes us. And that's why I want to bring you back to New York City to tell you what happened during this ridiculous experiment. Well, as I told you, the night came, the doors opened, we got the lighting just right, we invited New Yorkers, we hoped they would come, we didn't know if they would or not. Luckily, it was a free event, and they did. They came by the hundreds. They filled the space. They didn't just come. They drank the hot chocolate, they shared the hot chocolate, they did the stranger unstranger. They put on their heat-sensitive shirts. And when Paul Zach got on stage and insisted that they hug him, they waited, and they said, okay, just for you. First they hugged Paul. Then they hugged their friends. Then they hugged their friends' friends. Then they hugged their friends' friends' friends. And then it became this big, crazy, ridiculous hug, cuddle, puddle, ridiculous thing. Now, the Guggenheim Museum is a very serious institution. And the curators stood back, and they were a little bit worried. They said, this is not high art. But then finally, they joined as well. And by the end of the night, we felt so good. Maybe it was the oxytocin flowing through our veins. I don't know. But that's not why I'm telling you this story. Here's why. We were testing people that night. So, the lab lasted 3 months long. For the 3-month lab, we played a game. It was a test called Urbanology. It asked you questions. For example, do you think we should raise the minimum wage for people who work through the night? So each question was about what kind of society do you want? What kind of city do you want? Now, I'm curious about your reaction to this question. Do you think people who work at night should be paid more money? If you agree with me, say tak. If you think, no, they shouldn't get paid more. This is the city. Be tough. Say tak. You're very nice people. Maybe we'll have to hug. No, don't worry. So this was the question. Over the 3-month course of the lab, most people said, no. This is New York City. It's tough here. You come here, you better be tough. But after 1 hour of superficial encounters with strangers, little hugs, little friendship, it completely changed. 80% of people suddenly said, yes, of course. Yes, of course, let's be kind. They voted for a city that was slower, greener, kinder, more generous, more fair, more sustainable, even though they knew it would cost them more in taxes and cost them more in goods and services. This short experience of superficial trust-building encounters, it brought out the best in us, if only for one night. And when you think about it, this is just the kind of change we need if we're going to deal with the challenging issues of this urban century. Climate change, poverty, inequity, resource scarcity. We can't fix this if our societies are disconnected, if we are alone and indifferent. We can't. We need an attitude change. Now, I'm not saying you all have to go out and hug everyone in your city. I know you're very serious people. But we have lots of evidence to say that every time we have a trust-building encounter in the city, it changes us. And we have evidence to say that urban design brings us together or pushes us apart. And every day we must choose what city we will design. So I encourage you to invest in happier places, more connected places, to plan for it, to agree there is a role for city planning, a strong role, and to encourage your builders and developers to build for happiness. If you do, if we all do, we'll have cities that are not just healthier and more connected, we'll have cities that are stronger, more economically resilient. We'll have cities that bring out the very best in us. And I wish you luck on this journey. Thank you.